Well, hello everyone, and obviously we're very late on this week's edition of NASCAR Mount Rushmore, but better late than never. Let's go through the Mount Rushmore for Darlington Raceway. Of course, Darlington Raceway has just so much history. NASCAR has been racing there since the 1950s. Every single NASCAR great, NASCAR legend has raced at Darlington Raceway, one of the most historic, if not the most historic track in NASCAR, and still full of nostalgia when I went there last year. Just a great racetrack. I recommend anybody go to it. And I hope anybody that enjoyed the Goodyear 400 this past weekend goes to Darlington in the future as well, because usually I release these videos before the race, but with all my scheduling this past week, just now really being able to sit down and do it. So let's get through the Darlington Raceway Mount Rushmore. All right, so this first driver I'm going to be putting on the Mount Rushmore, I also consider to be the GOAT of Darlington Raceway, and that is the Silver Fox, David Pearson. David Pearson with 10 wins at the Lady in Black, the all-time win leader, 24 top fives, 30 top tens, and over 2,000 laps led at 2,116 laps led at the track. Too tough to tame. This is the first time that David Pearson's made an appearance on one of these Mount Rushmores, but David Pearson is one of the most legendary drivers of our sport, one of the greatest drivers in our sport, potentially had one of the most dominating, if not the most dominating era in our sport, was one of the greatest to ever do it. And I would be very surprised if this is the only time he ends up on a Mount Rushmore throughout this season. But his first one will be Darlington Raceway. And let's move on to our second driver on the NASCAR Mount Rushmore for Darlington Raceway, and shouldn't be a surprise whatsoever. This driver's already made a couple of appearances, and he's probably going to make a couple more, and I consider this driver to be the second best driver in NASCAR history, and he is also on my NASCAR all-time Mount Rushmore, and that is Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon has 7 wins, 19 top fives, 23 top tens, and 1,744 laps led at Darlington Raceway. Yeah, Jeff Gordon was always phenomenal at Darlington Raceway. I definitely feel like once they got into later eras of car, I think his performance began to slow down a little bit, especially when you had drivers like Jimmy Johnson out there, and then Denny Hamlin, who might be on this Mount Rushmore. Denny Hamlin, one of the best drivers to ever race at Darlington Raceway as well, and he had a little bit more competition, I would say, at Darlington once he got a little bit further out in his career. But him and Dale Earnhardt, they were both fantastic at this racetrack in the 90s, and they both had a lot of success, which leads me to my third driver on the Mount Rushmore, and that is the driver of the number 3 and the driver I consider to be the GOAT of NASCAR, but not the GOAT of Darlington Raceway, and that is Big E, the Black Knight, Dale Earnhardt Sr. Dale Earnhardt, probably a close second for the best driver at Darlington Raceway, with 9 wins, 19 top fives, 24 top tens, and the all-time leader in laps led at Darlington Raceway with 2,648 laps led at the Lady in Black. Which is fitting. The Lady in Black, the Black Knight, the guy in the black hat, Dale Earnhardt. It makes sense on why he was so good here. And Darlington seems like a perfect place for Dale. It's all about aggression. It's all about skill. It's all about being able to just sit in your seat. You know, it's being able to sit up in your seat, because that track takes so much out of you. So as long as you can sit up straight in your seat, stay out of trouble. And if there's gonna be trouble, you better be the one causing it, not being the one involved. And that's a skill of Earnhardt for sure. So Darlington makes a lot of sense on why he would be on this Mount Rushmore. And now we're on to the last spot on the Mount Rushmore, and this sometimes ends up being a little controversial. And this one, it was a debate. It was definitely a debate. I went back and forth on this a couple of times, but I didn't. I mentioned earlier, I said maybe Denny's on it. I decided that Denny isn't on it. He's the 5th driver. If I had a 5th person, it'd be Denny Hamlin. But the 4th driver I am putting on this Mount Rushmore is Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. Bill Elliott is the fourth driver I've decided to put on this Mount Rushmore. He had 5 wins, 22 top fives, 35 top tens. Very impressive numbers in top fives, in top tens. That's ultimately what got him onto this list, and 980 laps led. Yeah, Bill Elliott was phenomenal at Darlington. I wouldn't necessarily say it was his best racetrack, but it was definitely one of his best racetracks. And I definitely expect to see Bill Elliott on another Mount Rushmore at some point this season. But it's his first appearance on one of my NASCAR Mount Rushmores. And he was always phenomenal at this racetrack. Even in his later years, it seemed to be one of his better racetracks. I'd say there, Pocono, Michigan, Indianapolis. I think there was a couple of tracks in his later years because I didn't get to watch live his early years. I didn't watch him in the McDonald's car. My experience with him is very similar to Chase Elliott. That's why Chase Elliott drives the 9. I remember him driving the 9 for Everham. That's what I remember personally from Bill Elliott. I've seen a lot of his old races from watching Speed Channel as a kid and watching highlights now that I am older. But I didn't really experience that version of Bill Elliott. But just watching him in his later years, it was awesome to see. And Darlington was always one of his best racetracks. So Bill Elliott will be the last driver on your NASCAR Mount Rushmore for Darlington Raceway. Denny Hamlin could still make his way on here. Hamlin could still make his way on here. Larson has a bunch of laps led at the racetrack, but he only has the 1 win. I can see both of those drivers eventually maybe making it on to this Mount Rushmore if they continue on certain paths. But for the moment, that last spot goes to Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. But let me know in the comments, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore for Darlington Raceway? And now that I'm not going to any more races for a little bit, I went to Phoenix, went to Vegas, and now I'm more on a normal schedule. Do expect my Mount Rushmore video to come out earlier on in the week next week. Expect it to be probably Wednesday, maybe even Tuesday. But Tuesday or Wednesday, I would expect the Mount Rushmore for Martinsville Speedway. But once again, let me know in the comments, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore for Darlington Raceway? But for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.